kindergarten friends. So I have this huge book that is called A Treasury of Children's Literature, and it basically is a bunch of stories all combined into one giant book. So I found one story that is called The Ugly Duckling that I would like to share with you today. This story doesn't have a ton of pictures, so you have to make sure to use your imagination and close your eyes sometimes and picture what's going on in your head and play it like a movie when I read the words. The Ugly Duckling. It was a lovely summer day. The wheat was golden and wildflowers dotted the meadows. Beside them were cool forests with deep lakes. Near a green hedge by the water, a duck sat on her nest, waiting for her eggs to hatch. She had been sitting a long time, and she was getting tired. At last one shell cracked, and then another, and from each egg a little duckling poked its head out and cried, "Cheep, cheep!" The mother duck was overjoyed. "Quack, quack!" she said happily. Then she saw that one egg had still not hatched. With a sigh, she settled down in her nest. "How are you getting on?" called an old duck who had come to pay her a visit. "One of my eggs still hasn't hatched," replied the mother duck. "But look at all the others. Aren't they the prettiest ducklings you've ever seen?" "Oh, prettiest ducklings you ever saw?" "Indeed," the old duck agreed. "But let me look closer at the egg that won't hatch. It might be a turkey egg. Once I was tricked into hatching one, and after all my trouble the young turkey wouldn't go in the water." The old duck peered at the egg, which was larger than the other and gray in color. "Yes," she said, "that's a turkey egg, all right. Just leave it alone and come teach your own children how to swim." But the mother duck refused. "I've been sitting here so long already," she said. "A few more days won't make any difference." "Suit yourself," quacked the old duck and waddled off. The mother waited and waited. Then, with a crack, the egg finally hatched, and out popped the last duckling. He was a very strange-looking duckling indeed. So large and gray, even his mother had to admit that he was rather ugly. "Oh dear," she thought, "maybe it was a turkey egg after all. However, I'll soon find out when we go in the water." Early the next morning the mother duck led her brood to the river. It was a bright, sunny day, perfect for swimming. "Quack, quack!" she cried, and jumped into the water with a big splash. One of the ducklings followed her. One by one the ducklings followed her. At first they sank to the bottom, but soon they all bobbed up again, and before long they were all swimming nicely, including the ugly duckling. "How skillful he uses his feet," his mother said, "and how well he holds his head. He is not a turkey. He is my very own duckling after all. And if you look at him closely, he is not really as ugly as that at all." Feeling very proud, she beckoned her ducklings out of the water and marched them to the barnyard, for she wanted to introduce them to the other animals. Along the way she instructed her ducklings how to behave properly. "Hold up your head, don't turn in your toes," she said, "and bow to everyone, especially the old duck with the red tag tied around her leg. She is of Spanish blood and very noble. Here we are. Now be sure to quack to everyone." The little ducklings had learned their lessons well, and they did as they were told. The older ducklings looked them over carefully. "Another brood of ducklings?" sighed one large gray duck. "As if they weren't enough of us already." Then he pointed to the ugly duckling. "This one is so big and awkward looking," he said. "We don't want him here." The large gray duck then bit the ugly duckling in the neck. "He is not doing any harm," the mother cried. "Leave him alone." The old duck with the red tag on her leg then spoke. "The others are very pretty," she said, "but that last duckling is very ugly." "That can't be helped," replied the mother. "But he swims very well and is polite and well behaved. I'm sure he'll turn out all right." "Very well," sighed the old duck. "He can stay. Make yourselves at home." The other ducklings were treated well, and in a short time they felt comfortable in their new surroundings. But everyone was mean to the ugly duckling. Some ducks bit him, some made fun of him. The chickens, the geese teased him and bullied him, and the turkey cock, who acted as if he were king of the barnyard, said, "That duckling is so ugly I can't bear to look at him." Then he flew at the duckling and scratched him with his claws. The ugly duckling's brothers and sisters were not kind to him either. "Oh, you ugly creature," they scoffed whenever they saw him. "How we wish the cat would get you." Day by day the animal's scorn grew worse. Finally, one evening the duckling overheard his mother say that she wished he would just disappear. The ugly duckling was utterly miserable. He decided to run away, and so he flew over the hedge, frightening all the little birds who lived there. "They are afraid of me because I'm so ugly," the duckling thought. Then he flapped his wings and flew away to the great marsh where the wild ducklings lived. There he settled for the night. Early in the next morning the wild ducks noticed the ugly duckling and stared at him with curiosity. "What kind of duck are you?" they asked. The ugly duckling bowed politely. "I don't know myself," he replied humbly. "Well," the wild duck said, "you are certainly very ugly, but you seem nice enough, so as long as you don't wish to marry into our family, you may stay with us." The ugly duckling agreed, and they flew across the marsh together. But suddenly there was a loud "pop!" and two wild ducks fell dead among the reeds. Soon there were popping sounds all around. Hunters had surrounded the marsh, and they were firing at the wild ducks. The ugly duckling was terrified. He hid in a clump of reeds, and soon a ferocious-looking hunting dog came running at him. It glared at the ugly duckling and sniffed him, but didn't stop. "I'm so ugly that even a dog will not bite me," the ugly duckling thought. Then he lay very still, until hours later the shots had stopped, and the marsh was quiet again. He could still see where the wild ducks had fallen, and trembling all over, he flew towards the forest. It was evening, and the storm was rising. The rain began to fall so hard that the duckling could not go on. He stopped at a little cottage, and finding the door open, he walked inside. An old woman lived in a cottage with her prized hen and a big tomcat, which she loved very much. When the duckling entered, the hen began to cluck, and the cat began to meow. The old woman, who was quite nearsighted, peered around the room and called, "What's all that noise?" When she spotted the ugly duckling, she was delighted. She thought that he was nice, fat duck from a nearby farm. "What good luck!" she cried. "I hope you're not a drake, for I should dearly love to have some delicious duck's eggs." Then she gave the ugly duckling some bread. The hen and the cat scowled. They liked to think they were mistress and master of the household, and were not at all pleased about their new guest. "Can you lay eggs?" the hen asked the ugly duckling. "No," he replied. "Then what good are you?" "Can you arch your back and purr?" said the cat. "No," said the ugly duckling, hanging his head down low. "Then what can you do?" demanded the cat. "I can swim," replied the ugly duckling, and he told them how pleasant it was to swim in the cool water and dive to the bottom. "Pleasant!" cried the hen. "It sounds dreadful to me. Why, the cat is the cleverest creature I know, and he's told me many times how awful it is to get wet. If I were you, I'd forget about swimming and learn to lay eggs and purr, or you won't last here much longer." After that, the hen pecked the ugly duckling, and the cat scratched him whenever he got too close. At last the duckling decided he had better move on again. He flew across the fields until he came to a big pond in the middle of the forest. Here he could swim and dive as much as he liked, but he was careful to avoid all other creatures, for he had grown so ashamed of his ugly appearance. Autumn came, and the leaves on the trees turned red and gold. The wind grew sharper and colder, and the leaves all danced and twirled from the trees. Winter was coming. Soon the clouds grew thick and pale, and snow and hail fell. It was a difficult and lonely time for the ugly duckling. One evening as the sun was setting, He sat at the edge of the pond, shivering, and looked up at the sky. The clouds were radiant and bright. Flying overhead was a flock of the most beautiful birds he had ever seen. They were snow white, with strong wings and long, graceful necks. The ugly duckling had never seen birds like these before. He did not know that they were swans flying south for the winter. Their feathers gleamed in the last rays of sun. Spreading their wings, they uttered a cry unlike any he had heard before, and they rose higher into the sky. The ugly duckling marveled at the beautiful birds. Without knowing why, he stretched out his neck and called after them, a cry so strange it frightened him. And then the gorgeous birds were gone. Although he did not know what they were called, he had never felt so close to any living creature before. He felt a deep longing to be as proud and lovely as they were. But what would such a beautiful bird say if they were to see me? The duckling thought. The winter grew cold and fierce. Now the poor duckling had to swim in circles all day long to keep the water from freezing over. Every night the space he swam in grew smaller and smaller. At last the pond froze so hard that the ice crackled. The ugly duckling became so exhausted from trying to keep the pool clear for swimming that he fainted and froze fast in the ice. The next morning, a peasant who was passing by spotted the stiff, cold creature. He picked up the duckling and carried him home to his wife and children. The wife placed the ugly duckling near the warm fire, and soon he woke up. Wanting to play with the duckling, the children ran towards him. The quick movements, however, frightened the duckling. So badly he fluttered up, knocking over the milk jug. Then he flew into the butter cask and the corn barrel, and when he came out, what a sight he was! The woman screamed, running after him with a poker. The children laughed and tumbled over each other, trying to catch him. The poor, ugly duckling barely managed to escape out the window. Exhausted and heartsick, he hid in the bushes. It would be very sad to tell you all the hardships of the ugly duckling endured during the long, icy winter. But one day he woke up to feel the warm sun shining on his back. Tiny green leaves had sprouted out the trees. Birds were singing, and flowers were poking out of the dark earth. It was spring. Beautiful spring. The ugly duckling flapped its wings. They felt so much stronger than before. He rose high in the air and flew until he came to a large garden. Apple trees blossomed there. The willow trees lined a clear stream, dipping their long branches into cool water. It was such a beautiful and inviting spot. The ugly duckling flew down and settled beside the stream. Soon 3 beautiful white swans came gliding towards him from across the water. Seeing the lovely birds made the ugly duckling feel sadder than ever. If I, the ugly one, swam over to those royal birds, he said to himself, they will surely kill me for daring to come near them. But I don't mind. Better to be killed by such lovely creatures than endlessly pecked by ducks and hens who hate me. Entering the stream, he slowly swam towards the proud swans. The moment they saw him, they rushed towards him, their wings raised high. Go ahead, kill me, whispered the duckling, and he bent his head towards the water and waited to die. He saw his reflection in the clear water. To his amazement, he was no longer a dark gray bird, awkward and ugly. Instead, his neck had grown long and graceful, and his feathers were as white as snow. To be born in a duck's nest in a barnyard makes no difference to a bird hatched from a swan's egg. The ugly duckling had grown into a beautiful swan. The other 3 swans swam up to him and stroked his neck with their beaks in welcome. Soon some children came running to the garden and threw cake and breadcrumbs into the water. Look, they cried, there's a new swan. Why, he's the most beautiful one of all. When the once ugly duckling heard that, he felt quite shy and hid his head under his wing. He had been teased and mistreated because of his ugliness, and now he heard himself being called the most beautiful bird of all. Looking around at the bright sunlight, the fresh green trees, and the clear sparkling water, he ruffled his feathers and cried, I never dreamed I would be so happy even when I was the ugly duckling. The end. Well, I hope you liked reading about the ugly duckling. And I'm curious, what do you think that author wanted you to learn from that book? Why do you think the author wrote a book about an ugly duckling turning into a swan? I want you to tell someone in your family or tell a stuffed animal, why do you think that author wrote that book? But if they didn't hear the story, you might have to give them a finger summary and tell them what the story was about, and then tell them why do you think it was written. Okay, bye.